Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
A Revealed Past by LyricalPiece. After docking at a new island, the Straw Hats are captured by a group of scientists who want to extract their memories to farm information. Realizing Sanji is a Vinsmoke, the scientists believe his memories are the key to stealing Germa's advanced technology. The cook's secrets of his past are revealed on screen, and his crew have a hard time accepting what they're seeing. Adios.
The first thing Sanji was aware of was an incessant buzzing ringing in his ears. A hum of machines, he realized, meaning he was no longer on the Thousand Sunny, which was the last place he remembered being. He had come out from the galley carrying a tray of snacks for the crew. They were in range to dock at their next island. Lunacliff, Nami had called it. Sanji had only taken a couple steps when he noticed it was too quiet, but before he could question it, his arms and legs gave out. The tray clattered to the floor as the chef did the same, feeling like his body had been instantly turned to lead. When his head hit the floor, everything went black. Now, as the fog in his head lifted, the feeling in his body returning, he could feel cold metal wrapped around his wrists, which laid against his lap. Cuffs were tightly locked just beneath the sleeves of his dress shirt. He was leaned against a solid surface, sitting up, as the coolness seeped through his jacket into his sore shoulder blades. He let out a low groan as he tried to stretch away the fatigue, realizing his thighs and ankles were also restrained. That was more of a problem. When Sanji opened his eyes, he was greeted by a massive room covered in dim, cool lighting. Stark white tiled floors connected to equally bland walls, all glowed a faint blue from the mass collection of intricate screens and whirring gadgets lining the room. Most of the machinery Sanji couldn't even put a name to as silvery wires snaked from one monitor to the next, outlined by lines of turquoise light. Rows upon rows of elaborate levers filled multiple setups, with an array of buttons that blinked white and red and yellow. Counters were organized with beakers, flasks, and a variety of scopes Sanji had never seen before. It was a pretty high-tech laboratory, that was for sure. At the dead center of the immaculately complex room was a large modular desk holding a single lamp. Beyond it was a medical bed encompassed by a strange, circular contraption, perfectly nestled into a colossal screen that stretched from floor to ceiling. The desk was set up to face the bed and screen, and Sanji realized, where he sat behind that main desk, that there was a glass wall separating him from the rest of the room. It hummed as if alive. A futuristic prison cell wired with some kind of current. Beside him, Sanji noticed the rest of his crew lying or sitting in similar positions as himself, hands and legs secured. The Straw Hats were split up into groups of 3, each trio shackled in their own cell, barred off from the others with what definitely looked like an electrical field. Frankie, Usopp, and Robin were in the cell to his left, and beside them was Luffy, Chopper, and Brook. That meant. Sanji glanced to his right. Chained with him was the idiot swordsman and sweet Nami. The chef didn't know if he was glad his crew was trapped here with him, or simply glad he knew they were alive and unharmed. Whoever brought them all here hadn't been rough. The stretches of Nami's bare skin seemed unmarked and as flawless as ever, thankfully. Even the patches of Zoro's scarred skin showed no signs of fresh wounds or swelling. Well, except for the bruising crescent shape peeking just above the man's open collar. Sanji had placed that there himself, along with similar marks up and down that tanned body. He couldn't help that Zoro tasted so good, even if he did have algae for brains. Handsome brute. It wasn't long until the rest of the crew began to stir and groan. "Is everyone okay?" Sanji asked, voice gruff from disuse. Mumbles, and more groans, was the response he got, as well as a shaky thumbs up. "Captain Usopp's never been better, I can't feel my legs," said Brook. "Though, I suppose it's because I don't have any nerve endings. Feels like I've been hit by a train." Frankie let out a loud yawn. "What happened?" mumbled Nami. She was laying on her side, straining her neck up to take in her surroundings. "Don't worry, Nami Swan, I'll keep all harm away from you." Chopper interrupted with a squeak. "Ah, where are we?" "It seems to be an isolated cell within a lab," Robin analyzed. Her smooth voice seemed stiff. She glanced down at her bound wrists and legs and realized the problem. Sea prism stone. Ah, we didn't even get to explore the island first, Luffy complained. Usopp grumbled. Right, we should ask for the tour first next time. "'S fine. I still have my swords," said Zoro, peering down at his side. Only his wrists were bound, not his hands. However, the swords, too, were wrapped to Zoro's waist so tightly that the swordsman couldn't grip a single hilt. They must not see us as a big enough threat to disarm us. Robin glanced down at her cuffs again. Aside from our devil fruit powers, at least. Zoro was unfazed. That's their mistake. He pushed himself easily off his back into a sitting position, then used his bound legs to help Nami do the same. Thanks, she muttered. Who do you think they are? Chopper asked, scanning the lab with obvious curiosity. Frankie was also eyeing the impressive setup. There's some crazy stuff in here, he said. Doesn't matter who they are. Luffy's brows knit together as he wormed his way over to the glass door of his cell. Nami let out a whine. Whatever you're planning to do, Luffy, don't. Sanji recalled how much their lovely navigator hated being locked up with their captain, for reasons she had described as reckless and traumatizing. The glass holds some kind of computerized current, Sanji warned, but the rubber idiot wasn't listening. Luffy threw his head back as far as he could, before ramming it into the glass. There were several screams as the straw hat was zapped backward in a flash of blue light. Luffy hit the wall and slid down, skin smoking. Huh, he said. Usopp gawked at Luffy and then at the glass wall. Geez, what the hell was that? Most likely the same technology used for the bars at our sides, Robin said, watching the thin lines of electric blue zigzag from floor to ceiling between her, Frankie and Usopp, and the rest of their crewmates. Seems a bit dramatic, Brook murmured in a sing-song voice. It can't be electricity if it affected Luffy, said Frankie. Don't know what the hell they're using, though. That revelation seemed to upset the cyborg. Before anyone could comment further or try another risky escape tactic, lights began clicking on throughout the lab. The straw hats squinted, adjusting as the dim blue hues brightened to whites and yellows. To the far right, a set of metal doors rushed open. 3 people in pristine white lab coats strolled in. 2 men. 1 woman. Each sporting an ensemble of expensive, violet fabric beneath their buttoned-up coats. Without a word, they began flicking switches, pulling levers, and typing on keyboards without a single glance at their pirate prisoners. Oi, who are you people? Luffy demanded. He got no reply, and no matter how many attempts at grabbing their attention he tried, there was no response from them. He glanced at his crew. I don't think their ears work. Then, 2 more men entered the room. They were talking amongst themselves. The first was a tall scientist of a man, with hair as white as snow sticking in every direction. He was reading off the tablet he held in his black-gloved hands. His eyes, as blue and cold as ice, sat above a trimmed white beard and handlebar mustache. He wore his white lab coat buttoned up to his neck, a deep purple stripe across the chest and an odd emblem embroidered on his left breast pocket. A strange mechanical headband sat just above his hairline, goggles attached to them, connected with bulbs and gadgets. Wires cascaded down one side in loops onto his bony shoulder. The second man wore his lab coat draped open, a dark purple dress shirt underneath and a black tie. He wore equally purple glasses atop his wide nose, so opaque Sanji couldn't see his eyes. His dark hair was lacquered back, not a single strand out of place. Hey! Luffy yelled. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, future Pirate King. Now the exasperation from every other straw hat was palpable. But Handlebar Mustache paused. The man curiously approached Luffy's cell. His arctic eyes widened as he observed the straw hat, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His gaze roamed over the rest of his captives. My, he waved over his purple companion, excitement evident. Look at today's catch, Ashvin. His orotund voice turned amused. None other than the infamous Straw Hat Pirates, T-shi-shi-shi-shi. The other man, Ashvin, seemed unimpressed. You mean that's not why you captured us in the first place? Nami asked. Oh, no, my specialists bring in anyone who ventures onto this side of the island. You merely happened to dock in our perimeter, rather than the side with the city. And nobody escapes our gas. T-shi-shi-shi. Perhaps we will call it fate. Or a certain navigator, Zoro grumbled. Nami hissed at him. Don't put this on me. Luffy addressed the scientist again. What do you want with this then? The unnerving scientist smiled. There was something about his two light eyes that creeped Sanji out. It wasn't that he seemed to see too much, rather, that he could if he wanted to. I am Dr. Trillion Hollowell, your esteemed captor. Tishishi. Also, founder of Hollowell Mind Tech, where you have so fortuitously found yourselves. My assistant and I work tirelessly with all my specialists to further advance our mind technology here. Call it a hobby. The creepy smile was back, showing a row of unnaturally perfect teeth that seemed to stretch too wide for his narrow face. Many of our guests hold little to no information of value to us. However, they make for excellent guinea pigs. Tishishishi. With them, we have nearly perfected our technique to extract the information we seek from more knowledgeable visitors. Usopp gulped. How do you know if a visitor is knowledgeable? Fear not, young one. Hollowell's eyes gleamed. Your crew is exactly what I and my specialists have been waiting for. But that's exactly what I was fearing, the sniper squawked. What information could scientists possibly gain from a band of pirates? Robin asked lightly. Perfect distracting question, Sanji thought. Leave it to Robin Kwan. The more information they could extract from them, the better. The snowy-haired scientist seemed eager enough to talk. He said their so-called hobby was technology. Farming for information or not, that didn't exactly put their crew high on the list for their particular interest. Except maybe Frankie. Sanji frowned at the thought. Hollowell moved on from the first cell to examine the next three prisoners more intently. Frankie, Robin, and Usopp stilled under his gaze. Nico Robin, said Hollowell. Everyone stiffened. I am sure you, out of anyone here, are aware that pirates can hold a wealth of secrets. Tishishishi. Pirates tend to travel far beyond the ranges of average people. Ashvin suddenly cut in, tapping away at his tablet. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular. At least, Sanji didn't think so. It was hard to tell what was going on behind those purple glasses. They meet people. They see things. Hollowell clapped. And it is within those memories that valuable information can be buried, waiting for the right person to dig up. Tishishi. Without elaboration, Hollowell moved on to examine the last of the three cells. Each occupant glared back at him. There was nothing he could possibly see in them. They were a cook, a swordsman, and a navigator. Surely, he'd realized this was all a waste of time and let them go. Sanji's hope faded, however, as the man seemed to linger. He tilted his head, hovering in silence, strange eyes roaming over Sanji far longer than the blonde man was comfortable with. See something you like, pervert? Sanji griped. The strange man blinked slowly. That's quite interesting, he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Sanji had no idea what the man was talking about, what he saw. But he didn't like it. With a sudden shout, Hollowell was laughing, the gleam in his gaze wild. And the hand of fortune strikes again. Fate, indeed. Tishishishi. Hollowell clicked his tongue at his specialists and pointed a sharp, gloved finger at the Straw Hat cook. We will begin with that one. In a flurry of movement, the silent specialists of Hollowell Mind Tech shuffled around the lab at top speed. Wires were unplugged and reconnected elsewhere with trained precision. Equipment began to disassemble themselves and transform into something new. Sanji's eyes couldn't keep track of everything that was shifting in front of him, nor could he make sense of it. Hollowell tucked his tablet under his arm and walked to the modular desk in the center of the room. He flicked a switch as he went. The staged medical table began to erect itself, while reassembling its own parts. Compartments slid open. Corners tucked themselves away. A fuck ton of restraints appeared, all of which sprouted that odd electric blue current, connecting with the strange, circular rim that hovered a meter above the now upright table. One of the specialists, a large man with a mop of red hair, tapped at the circular contraption. It began to glow blue, and the restraints on the medical table clicked open at certain lock points, like a fly trap waiting for its prey to land. Sanji's stomach twisted. Memosphere activation complete, the brusque, red-haired man announced. Tishishi. Excellent, Loic. Thank you. Hollowell addressed the other two specialists. Reese, prepare the extraction. Inveer, assist Ashvin with restraining our lovely guest. Inveer walked up to the third cell of prisoners, his pointed face scowling. Everything about the man was sharp: jaw, nose, even the shape of his smooth, hairless scalp. He had to be broad beneath his lab coat, as his purple slacks accented thick muscle. Though his left hand wore a black glove up to his elbow, his right hand was solid metal. He reached out with his right hand. It went through the rigged glass like nothing was there. At the same time, Ashvin pulled a remote from his breast pocket. He aimed it at the cell and a red light flashed. Nami screamed. She and Zoro slammed onto their backs. Chopper and Usopp yelled. Nami! Sanji shouted. Sweat beaded on the woman's forehead, orange hair fanned beneath her. Zoro wasn't in better shape. The swordsman's teeth were gritted, neck veins straining as if he was trying to lift his head but couldn't. Oi, what are you doing to Nami and Mosshead? Keeping them at bay, responded Ashvin. Invier, then, stepped fully through the glass and approached the bound blonde. Sanji's mind reeled. He could try to fight back, but would it be futile? He couldn't move his legs, his greatest weapons. Not to mention the sea prism stone cuffs were draining his haki. Oi, Curly. Sanji's eyes flew down to meet a steely gray one. Don't do anything stupid. There was unspoken concern swimming behind the gray that Sanji didn't want to think about. There were too many emotions involved. Instead, the cook scoffed. Like you're one to talk, you shitty swordsman. Let's go. Invier snatched Sanji's upper arm and hauled him out. Sanji didn't resist. The Mosshead was right for once, and besides, it was better that he was going first. Whatever was going to happen didn't matter. The others could think of a plan while he was being interrogated. Nothing he couldn't handle. There were ladies present, after all. The Straw Hat Love cook caught sight of the female specialist, bare legs on display at the bottom of her lab coat. Long teal hair pulled into a low bun at the base of her tanned, slim neck. Sanji was suddenly seeing hearts. If anyone is going to handle me, I'd rather it be Reese. The invisible hold on Zoro and Nami was released as soon as Sanji was out of the cell. They sat up groggily, both mumbling something about typical cook. Luffy laughed. Even about to be tortured, Sanji is funny. Heart eyes vanishing, Sanji scowled. Idiot rubber, don't say it like that. Tishishishi. Torture is such a strong word. Hollowell clicked his tongue, straightening the tablets he had organized on his desk. His wiry hands held up a clear, glass ball wrapped with a single titanium lock. Where the tips of his fingers pressed, it started to emanate a blue light. In one swift motion, the empty ball was filled with glittering, blue gas. Or liquid. Or, well, Sanji couldn't tell what the hell it was. Chopper's odd gasp rang out. What is that? The little doctor asked, echoing everyone's thoughts. And what's it for? Usopp wondered, voice shaking. Hollowell held the glowing ball proudly in front of him. It was the same icy blue shade as his eyes. With my unique technology, I can harness my rec fruit ability in a physical way. Isn't it glorious? Tishishishi. Rec fruit? Frankie quirked an eyebrow at Robin. The archaeologist hummed. If I recall, its ability is to, in fact, recall. Gee, that was super helpful. Usopp muttered. Recall what, exactly? Asked Brooke. Robin shook her head, trying to think. They said they farm information, so. Sanji felt the knots in his stomach tighten as he approached the center of the room. Surrounded by test tubes and syringes and crazy technology he couldn't understand seemed all too familiar for his comfort. Sanji grunted as he was thrown against the medical table. He struggled reflexively only a second before Invier and Ashvin overpowered him. They had him locked in place quickly. Sanji's arms hung at his sides, cold clasps wrapped at wrists, elbows, and across his chest. Sanji swallowed hard. The same solid locks were wrapped around his ankles and thighs. He's ready for the neural headpiece, Ashvin said, stepping back. Reese advanced, carrying a metallic helmet covered in knobs. She placed it on Sanji's head before he had a good look at it, and as it fell heavy against him and blocked his line of sight, the cook's adrenaline ignited. He shouted, throwing his head forward. The helmet flew off and clattered to the ground, startling everyone in the room. Reese quickly retrieved it, anger flashing across her face. Ashvin glared at the now panting blonde. He pressed something behind him. A manacle slid over Sanji's throat and forehead, further immobilizing him. Stop, Sanji pleaded, trying to hear past his heartbeat. His cheeks flushed in embarrassment at his outburst. His crew watched him with wide eyes, and, God, he hated it. Sanji inhaled sharply, wishing for a cigarette. When he tried to move, none of the manacles so much as budged. Is the helmet really necessary? He spat through clenched teeth. Hollowell stared at him curiously from his desk before resuming his typing, fingers flittering across his line of tablets. Why, it's the most important part. Tishishi. You carry something I require. Sanji quirked an eyebrow at the man. Like what? Memories. You're going to take Sanji's memories? Chopper gulped. I won't be taking his memories from him. I will simply be rummaging through them. Tishishi. Why the cook? Questioned Zoro. Hollowell looked at Sanji as if he was the one who asked. Your memories are minefields of information. With this technology, I will be able to extract those memories, store them, and dissect the data at my leisure. And you may hold exactly what I've been searching for. Every fiber of Sanji's being was screaming for him to escape. He didn't want anyone in his memories, let alone this freak. What memories could Sanji possibly have that interest you so much? Nami asked. Maybe a recipe, said Luffy. Nami scowled in his direction, but Hollowell laughed. Tishishi. Something like that. Reese advanced again with the helmet in her hands, and Sanji balked, panicking despite himself. Why don't you just ask me? Maybe I'm feeling generous. Tishishi. From my experience, a Vinsmoke is never generous. The blood in Sanji's veins froze over. His heart dropped to the pit of his stomach, and he stared, wide-eyed, at the icy scientist. Sanji could feel every member of his crew staring at him. He refused to look back. To see the recognition. To see the eyes of the people who knew just enough of Sanji's shameful ancestry to pity him. He didn't want their pity. And he didn't want their worry. Wasn't worth that. He hoped whole cake it. He always hoped there would be an end. What makes you think I'm a Vinsm? Vinsmokes have distinct features, Ashvin easily responded. He was getting tired of the delay. Sanji cursed. Look, whatever information you're looking for, I can guarantee I don't have it. He struggled helplessly as Reese replaced the helmet and locked it at the back of his head and under his jaw. The pressure made Sanji sick. I'm not a Vinsmoke. Hollowell only grinned, as his assistant and specialist sat at their designated monitors and dimmed all lights but the ones above Sanji. Your truth will be revealed in good time, Vinsmoke Sanji. You may as well relax. Tishishi. Sanji couldn't catch his breath. Everything was dark. The helmet strapped to him was too heavy. Images he wanted to ignore were already racing through his mind, and he didn't know how Hollowell's power worked, but he sure as hell didn't want to make it easy for him. None of this was what Sanji was expecting to happen. Begin the extraction. No, I can't do this. Sweat collected across Sanji's brow. His breathing came in short gasps. They can't have these memories. A voltaic sensation rose the hairs on Sanji's arms, sweeping through his body like a rush of adrenaline. Startled by a sudden vibration against his skull, Sanji yelped. He couldn't hear his own voice anymore. He couldn't hear anything, could he? Was someone yelling? Was it him? A queasy fluttering of reservations rose like bile up Sanji's chest. He tried to clutch at it. He couldn't move. And then there was a burning deep in his head, followed by a prickling sensation of 1,000 needles. It grew stronger. More needles. Large needles. Too many needles. It hurt. And then a moth, whispering. Brushing its wings against his ear. He wanted to listen. Wanted to hear what it had to say. He didn't know why. Just felt the urge. The urge to listen. But, shit, it was telling him to remember. To remember. To remember, Vinsmoke Sanji, ooh. Begin the extraction. Ashvin took the glass ball Hollowell filled with the physical manifestation of his devil fruit power and slid it into a slot along the rim of the memo sphere. The machine, ominous as it curved around the Straw Hat Cook, hummed to life, encased in a soft blue glow like everything else in the lab. Sanji's fists balled at his sides, knuckles widening. Zoro worried his nails would dig into his palms and damage his hands. A startled scream erupted from Sanji's lips, making Zoro curse, and several other Straw Hats scream with him in fear that something had happened. Luffy started yelling. It's okay, Sanji, we're here with you. Yeah, Usopp mumbled. Whatever good that'll do the poor guy. Brook tilted his bony head. Never underestimate the power of morale. The skeleton hated to see any of his crewmates possibly tortured. These were an odd bunch, to be sure. Who knew what techniques they used? Hoping their words were a comfort no matter how slight, Robin and Frankie also began to call for him. Be strong, Sanji. You got this. Bro. Tears streamed down their doctor's face. Be brave, Sanji. Oh, I can't watch this, Nami cried, peering through her splayed fingers. Zoro didn't move. Didn't speak. Focus intense on his cook, because, fuck, why wasn't Zoro able to stop his crew from getting captured in the first place? How had he let this happen at all? And now Curly was about to have his memories torn out of his head or something. The cook was over there, shackled, having one of his panic attacks he always pretended didn't exist, in front of everyone. And Zoro couldn't do a damn thing. While the rest of the crew shouted encouragement, Zoro doubted the cook could hear. Must they be here? Ashvin murmured to his superior. Hollowell glanced wickedly over his shoulder at the noisy crew. Let them holler to their heart's contents. Watching will give them an idea of what to expect when it's their turn. It will make them realize how very little they can hide from me. Tishishishishishi. What the hell was that crazy bastard yammering about? The first thing Zoro was going to do when they got out of here was cut Hollowell's tongue out. Suddenly, the walls behind Sanji lit up. Giant screens blinking like the rhythm of a heart. Hollowell signaled to his assistant, and Ashvin strode back to Sanji and spoke gently against his ear, lips touching skin. Zoro would kill him. As soon as Ashvin pulled back, Sanji writhed. The cook's teeth snapped together, making Zoro flinch. His face scrunched in pain, and his body started shaking. Chopper wailed, and Nami screamed at the purple man. What did you do to him? Ashvin rolled his sleeves up as he retook his seat. Suggested he remember his time with the Vinsmokes, he said, coolly, like the indifferent asshole that he was. If you had to know, with my call fruit it becomes almost impossible to turn down my suggestions. Oh God, Nami groaned. This was getting worse and worse. They needed an escape plan, and fast. How do you know anyone is even thinking what you're telling them to? Frankie was cut off in an instant. The screens behind Sanji beeped, spluttered into a strange static, and then, a cacophony of voices. Sanji was making some of that rat food again. Father, help. Why is Sanji so weak? The gap in their scores keeps increasing. Dad, it's scary. Hey, Slowpoke, can't you run any faster? What did I do wrong, Dad? I think we're supposed to cross over the red line soon, towards the East Blue. Come on, Sanji, stop crying like a little baby. Run away. Run, Sanji. The blur of voices and colors grew louder and faster until, all at once, the screen widened into a single shot. A bowl with a whisk. And a tiny hand, attached to a tiny body, connected to a familiar, tiny face. Is this, but Luffy, for once, trailed off into silence. The tiny blonde with the curling brows above wide, boyish ocean blue eyes, looked excitedly down at his whisked concoction. Looks pretty good, he said with a laugh as tiny as he was. In united shock, the Straw Hat crew gasped. These are Sanji's memories, the Straw Hats were screaming. He's Sookuud, Nami, Usopp, Frankie, Brook, and Chopper cried in unison, streaks of tears running down their faces. He's already cooking, Chopper sniffled. Luffy laughed. That's our Sanji. Look at the little man go, he's super into it. Robin's cheeks were tinted red, her eyes wider than usual. He's so soft. He must be protected at all costs, she thought fervently. Zoro didn't want to enjoy this. He really didn't. Not while present Curlybrow was shackled and suffering. Not while strangers invaded his memories against his will. But, damn, was he a cute kid. The memory seemed to shift forward. Little Sanji was now using the crate to reach the countertop. He unwrapped the freshly baked cake with a cheesy grin. Full of pride. That does it, he giggled, after adding frosting and topping it off with a strawberry. It actually looked quite delicious from a chef his age. Not that anyone was surprised. The Straw Hats were all smiling despite themselves at the young cook's obvious joy, so much the same as the Sanji they knew today. Suddenly, 3 additional colorful heads peered around the counter, sporting mischievous smirks. Ah, Hollowell hummed from the shadow of his desk. Some familiar faces, huh, Ashvin, Tishishishi. Nami groaned. Sanji's brothers. If she never saw those jerks again it would be too soon. Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji, Brook remembered, pointing out their respective hair colors to those who hadn't met them on Whole Cake Island. The smaller versions on-screen were dressed similarly as little Sanji, except in their own signature colors. Each also wore their own unique accessory. Usopp cleared his throat with a quirked eyebrow. So, Child 1, Child 2, and Child 4. That explains the meaning behind Sanji's name, Frankie said with a frown. Naming your children after the order they were born seemed a bit too cold to the cyborg. Of course, what they witnessed next was colder. In another memory shift, the numbered brothers went running out of the kitchen with Sanji's cake in their hands. Hey! Little Sanji was right behind them. When they stopped, Sanji held his fists at his sides and glowered at them. Give me that, he demanded with a pout. Out of nowhere, the ball of Yanji's foot collided with Sanji's stomach, sending the blonde flying back. Several Straw Hats gasped at the violent turn the memory took, seemingly out of nowhere. They watched as little Sanji smacked into the castle wall, stone cracking at impact. He slid to the ground and landed on his side. They're strong for children, Chopper commented quietly. But why were they hitting Sanji? Sanji's three brothers surrounded him. Yep, he was in the kitchen, laughed Niji. Yanji sneered. Sanji was making some of that rat food again. Sanji sat up with a huff. Ichiji approached his brother, holding up the cake he had been so excited about. Royalty doesn't cook. At those words, Sanji jumped angrily to his feet, scowling. You shut up. Zoro almost smirked, but then he watched the little cook throw a punch at the red-haired kid. Never seen him use his hands. That must have come later. Sanji's tiny fist clocked Ichiji's nose. Ichiji didn't even flinch. Sanji's hand cracked. It pulsed as he cradled it with a quiet moan. Ouch. What are these kids made out of? Frankie started to question, but was cut off as Ichiji threw Sanji's cake to the floor, making Chopper offended on little Sanji's behalf. Ichiji launched at his blonde brother, strangling him until his back hit the floor, yelling, "You piece of trash." He punched him with both fists. Sanji's head swung from side to side with each strike. "Don't ever touch me again." "Geez," mumbled Usopp, flinching, while the others watched with various expressions of disbelief and confusion. This was Sanji's family? It was hard for them to comprehend that their kind cook grew up being bullied in such a way. Luffy stared at the scene playing out, unblinking. When he spoke, there was a rare seriousness to his tone. Why are they treating him differently? I thought they were brothers. Brothers don't do that. Zoro was glaring at the screen, while Nami sighed at their captain. Weren't you paying attention at all on Whole Cake Island? She peeked up at the screen through her lashes with a strange sadness she'd never felt for Sanji before. Although those who had already headed for Wano knew very little about the Vinsmokes as a family, even those who had gone to bring him back to the crew hadn't asked questions. They only knew what they had witnessed with their own eyes. Which wasn't anything particularly good, Nami granted, but she never would have imagined the violence she was witnessing now. At such young ages, no less. As little Sanji was relentlessly beaten by one, the two other boys only laughed and pointed. Oh man, he's so weak, Niji chortled. Sanji's head continued to get knocked back and forth, face getting more and more swollen. And the Straw Hats becoming more and more sick. We were all born on the same day, said Ichiji, finally getting off his brother. Sanji's a quadruplet? Several Straw Hats exclaimed. Sanji remained sprawled on his back, now with a missing tooth. How are we related to such a loser? You're a failure, Niji agreed as if it was funny. I don't care if he is a kid, Zoro grumbled. I deck him. At the same time, Chopper growled. Sanji's not a failure. Or a loser. The reindeer doctor's eyes started watering as he watched the little boy their Sanji used to be start spilling tears of his own. Sanji shouldn't cry. As the brothers continued to cackle, footsteps sounded from the hallways behind them. Someone was coming, and Sanji opened his fearful eyes, hope seeping in. Hope that his pain was going to stop. He just wanted it to stop. As the man the footsteps belonged to appeared, Hollowell laughed. Vinsmoke Judge, Tishishishi. He clicked his tongue and tapped his fingers against his desk. There is no way to directly control what our guest remembers, or in what order they remember in. There is also no way to speed up or slow down the process. However, maybe this Straw Hat's younger days will hold some information after all. Tishishi. The rest of the Straw Hats scowled at the mad man. On-screen, Vinsmoke Judge was followed by Sanji's pink-haired sister, Reiju, Nami noted. The one who sucked Luffy's poison from his lips, Chopper supplied, making Usopp and Frankie sputter. "Oh, right," chuckled Brook. Luffy tilted his head, not remembering, while Robin laughed lightly. "Well, that sure sounds like a story for another time." "Yeah. Like when the cook isn't getting turned into a bloody pulp by his own family," said Zoro, glooming the room again faster than he could slice a building in half. The cackling brothers cut off and looked over at their approaching father. Sanji lifted his own head as much as he could, moaning. Vinsmoke Judge glanced over at the boys with a frown. Picking on Sanji again? Clearly, it happened often. The Straw Hats frowned. Little Sanji rolled off his back, onto his elbows, and he reached out. "They hurt me, father," he said. Words slightly slurred from his swollen lips. Just that movement alone seemed to tire him out. He panted, falling onto his forearms. It took the child a moment to catch his breath. Judge watched him without a flicker of emotion. Sanji pushed himself, slowly, back up to his knees. "Please help me," he said, shaking. His wide eyes pleaded up at his father. "Can you tell them to stop?" The giant of a man peered at his child with a cold, dark blue eye. "Why should I?" Everyone's blood ran cold. Fear erupted in little Sanji's eyes. Eyes that, thankfully, were a lighter blue than his father's. "What, father, why? If you are not a fighter, and you are unable to stand up for yourself, I have no obligation to help you. I gain nothing by raising you." Jaws dropped, and eyes narrowed. "What a terrible thing to say to your child," Robin spat, protective of the little boy who would one day be on his hands and knees. Sanji shook. Tears beginning to drip from his face to the stone floor, until they became long, endless streams down his swollen cheeks. "Why would you say that?" he asked, tender voice breaking. Nami clutched at her heart. Chopper's sniffles intensified. Robin closed her eyes, unable to watch even though she was forced to listen. The men had shadows cast around their glares. And as they listened to Vinsmoke Judge tell the little cook that he was a disgrace to the family name, Zoro's gut clenched uneasily. Something told him they had barely grazed the surface of the cook's past. The king of Germa turned a blind eye to his son's abuse. Reiju's giggle lit up the dark hallway as she followed after her father without a care. Niji was the first of the brothers to turn back on Sanji. He pulled the blonde up by his yellow shirt, grinning. "I'll toughen you up." Sanji was scared. Everyone in the room could see that, could feel that somehow from the way Sanji was remembering it. And why wouldn't he be frightened? He was a kid. Young and small, and just beaten and called a disgrace only to then be abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect him no matter what. 5 other people in that family, Zoro thought darkly, and Sanji was alone. Red-haired, scowling Ichiji approached and echoed their father's words. "You're such a disgrace." He grabbed one of Sanji's arms while Niji took hold of the other. "All right, Yanji, have at him." The green-haired kid trotted backward. "This is gonna be fun." The Straw Hats realized Yanji was setting himself up for a running start. They watched, horrified, as little Sanji, in his own state of shock, hung limp, petrified, as his older brothers propped him up like a target. At top speed, Yanji head-butted Sanji's chest, ramming him into the wall again. Sanji struggled to breathe as his 3 brothers laughed above him, and Vinsmoke Judge never looked back. The memory melted, molding into something new. The brothers' wicked cackles faded into the background. And the room remained dead silent. Sanji's mind wove like molasses. The imagery swirled, blurring colors together and reshaping them until a new memory solidified on the screen. It was the same castle wall as before, still splintered from little Sanji's assault, although it appeared a tad more worn. Like time had passed. As the memory panned out, Sanji, their Sanji, stood tall above it. Jaw trimmed and squared, hands in the pockets of his black slacks and wearing a white shirt that loosened further up the chest and ruffled outward. Sanji looked not the part of a pirate, but of a prince. "That's what he was wearing when we saw him at Whole Cake Chateau," Chopper noted. This was a more recent remembrance. Behind the cook was a head of glossy green hair. "Bring back memories. An older Yanji sneered. The blonde didn't acknowledge him, but that didn't deter the green-haired Vinsmoke. It's good to see you. I'm surprised. I thought you would be dead by now, but look, you're scraping along as a pirate. Sanji didn't say a word, didn't so much as move, but Yanji wanted a reaction. Cat got your tongue? Get lost, responded Sanji, not a glance in his brother's direction. I have nothing to say to any of you. Fine. I'll leave you alone. Once you make me, the swift kick directed at Sanji only blurred through him as the vision morphed again, turning the two men back into boys. Ah, I wanted to see Sanji beat him up, pouted Luffy. The boys were atop a high tower, peering over the edge with their three other colorful siblings. Down below, Vinsmoke Judge stood with a group of lab-coated men carrying clipboards. Reiju first, a man with thick glasses called out. The pink girl in question hopped onto the ledge and jumped. She landed on her toes with a graceful yet powerful thud, splintering the stone floor. The Straw Hats were not expecting that kind of force from the little girl. Reiju stepped back as her first brother was called, now Ichiji. Following the same easy movements as their sister, the first and second sons of Vinsmoke Judge jumped. Then it was Sanji's turn, but the poor boy's lips were quivering. He didn't move. That's interesting, Robin thought. Sanji is the only one to show a wide range of emotion. Yanji sent an irritated look toward his older brother before foregoing waiting his turn and launching off the tower with a big smile. The Germa scientists below called on the remaining Vinsmoke again. Sanji stepped forward, cautious. Sweat dripped from his brow. He eyed the height, and his vision blurred. Dad, it's scary. It was a normal reaction from an 8-year-old kid, and yet the Straw Hats had to wonder why Sanji seemed to be the only one afraid. They knew their cook could hardly be called a coward, so if he was supposedly raised the same as his siblings, then shouldn't he act more like them? Not that any of them wanted Sanji to have turned out like the other boys. But still, for the pirate crew who knew the chef better than anyone, the facts just weren't adding up. Unable to summon the courage to jump, little Sanji dropped to his knees, defeated, and the images shifted into a slew of training scenes. First, was a race. A starting gunshot fired into the air and young Sanji flinched at the loud noise while the other 4 siblings sped away in clouds of dust. Panicked, he quickly tried to catch up. His speed, however, was no match at all, and little Sanji hated that. Hated it so much that he was falling farther and farther behind. And hated that when he pushed himself harder, he tripped and scraped his knee. Judge and the other kids didn't even wait for him to finish. He wasn't worth it, little Sanji's thoughts echoed. And by the utter look of helplessness on the boy's face, he had no hope that he was ever catching up. He was always too weak. That pissed Zoro off more than the swordsman expected it would. Not only watching the memories, but also hearing little Curly's thought process as well. Part of Zoro was irritated at the cook for his lack of confidence. Zoro was a confident kid after all. Maybe too confident depending on who you asked. But the logical part of Zoro knew he couldn't blame Sanji. He didn't have to be a child development expert like Chopper, or Robin, or even Nami, to know that if every person around him called him a failure every damn chance they had, then of course that was what he was going to believe, wasn't it? And the shitty cook didn't still think like that anyway. Right? The memory proceeded to the next session, an elaborate obstacle course constituting flaming hurdles. Sanji was the only one who got burnt. Man, Sanji must have really trained hard to get as strong as he is now, huh? He only seems so uncoordinated in comparison. Luffy, Nami snapped. Are you telling me you were any better at the age of 8? Haha, yeah, I was worse. I couldn't match up to Ace and Sabo for a long time. Nami sighed at him. It almost seems as if the Vinsmoke children are fitted to be stronger than an average human, Robin noted. Usopp turned his head. Fitted? Like altered? How? Asked Chopper. Genetically, Frankie guessed. It couldn't be cybernetically as Frankie would have sensed another cyborg on board. But little bro Sanji doesn't seem to be working, for, lack of a better word. He added the last part when he caught Zoro's glare in his direction. The cook worked just fine. If that's the case, though, Frankie trailed off. Then our dear Sanji is the only one actually physically feeling anything, Brook finished, voice low. Pain. Exhaustion, etc. Nami frown tightened. It's no wonder he's scared all the time. That's so unfair, Luffy said, trying to cross his arms before he remembered they were confined. You mean he's the only one who gets hurt? Chopper watched the screen of memories with knit brows. Poor Sanji. Far out in the ocean, the next exercise took place. The children were thrown into the water to test their swimming and stamina. The shore was miles away. Of course, 4 out of 5 popped out at the finish line. Sanji never made it, drowning in the current as his siblings nonchalantly wondered if he finally died. Everyone glowered. Even if he is slower than they are, they don't have to be so mean. Chopper snapped. The Germa scientists monitoring the kids' training fished little Sanji out of the water and resuscitated him. Nobody wanted to think how many times their cook probably nearly died as a child. A classroom setup appeared next, and for the first time, little Sanji was smiling. Ah, came his thoughts. A baby turtle had wandered onto his desk. Come here, little guy. I'm not gonna hurt you, he softly promised the tiny creature. He giggled, pleased when the turtle trusted him. He loved animals. They were cute and nice to him and were his only friends. Wah, tears streamed from Frankie's eyes. That's super sad, bro. Usopp had his face buried in the crook of his arm. I'm not crying or anything. Captain Usopp doesn't cry. I'll be your friend, Sanji, Chopper cried, making Luffy laugh because he was an animal, too. Robin's eyes softened. She knew loneliness all too well. Did young Sanji have anybody? What seemed to be some time later, in the same classroom, Sanji's bandaged face lit up as his turtle friend moved around him. That is, until a brown boot flew into view, kicking the animal away. Little Sanji cried out. Along with Chopper and Luffy. Oh come on, Zoro groused. Let the kid cook have something. He had never hated children until these 3 curly-browed brothers became known to him. Why do you keep playing with that dumb turtle for? Yanji demanded, looking down at his brother. Sanji's fury was lit. Why did you do that? He launched himself at his brother. Of course he became infuriated enough to fight when it was someone else who was hurt and needed defending, the Straw Hats thought. Yanji socked Sanji in the face before he could touch him, blood spurting at impact. The other 2 boys came over to watch as Yanji pounced on the blonde, smiling as their brother's grunts of pain echoed. Sanji's just their punching bag, muttered Usopp with a glare. They're lucky I didn't know Sanji during this period or I, the mighty Captain Usopp, would have called my fleet of 8,000 men to overthrow the kingdom of Germa. Yeah, Chopper enthusiastically agreed. The one with green hair seems the most antagonistic, Brook said, then looked over at their swordsman, along with everyone else. No wonder he didn't like you, Nami told him. Luffy laughed as Zoro glowered at the witch. Within the next second, the memory manifested a crowd of cheering Germa soldiers. They circled around Niji and Sanji as the 2 faced each other armed with bamboo swords. Sanji stared at his brother, his expression solemn. Little Sanji didn't want to fight. The Straw Hats noticed how much he was already scratched up and bruised, whereas none of his siblings had a single mark on them. Rightfully frightened, Sanji was quaking. Still, he pushed himself forward. He closed his eyes with a deep breath and brought the bamboo stick above his head before bringing it down against Niji's. The blue-haired kid let him. Just stood there. The sword snapped to pieces, leaving no damage to its target. No wonder Sanji doesn't use swords, said Luffy. He's not very good with them. Rubber idiot, Zoro muttered at their captain. After Sanji lost his sword, Niji gave him an evil smirk. It was his turn. Niji jumped into the air and swung his sword full force. He smacked Sanji over and over and over, while the little blonde cowered against the stone, defenseless and trying to surrender. OWW, it hurts. Gah, okay. I give up. Niji didn't let up. Nobody stopped him. Sanji cried as his brother beat him relentlessly with the stick. Please, stop it. Leave me alone, Niji. Why isn't anyone doing anything? Nami stomped her feet in agitation. It wasn't until Sanji was nearly unconscious that the surrounding soldiers forcefully pulled the blue boy off the yellow one. There was a moment of awareness for Sanji that his father was watching, unimpressed, and a memory within the memory formed. It layered over the one they had been watching. Like a filter. It was the 5 Vinsmoke children lined up in numerical order. Children, Judge addressed the orderly row of younglings standing before his throne. Of all the things I've built, you are the greatest. You're an incredible team of scientifically modified superhumans. Everyone's ears perked at the information, including the creepy Hollowell mind tech scientists. You're the fruits of my extensive research. Brilliant. Unlike normal humans, you are unbound by emotion. Huh? Luffy tilted his head. They don't feel anything at all? That's why they're cruel for no reason, said Zoro. If there is a reason to be cruel, Brook added absently. They don't know what pain feels like, physically or emotionally, realized Nami. There's no guilt, because there's no remorse. Robin nodded. And there's no kindness, because there's no empathy. Vinsmoke Judge used his own offspring as experiments. Tishishishi. How fascinating. Fascinating was not the word Zoro would use. He tried not to think about how the warmongering king did the altering, but there was no way in hell it could have been pleasant. On screen, Judge was still spewing out his nonsense. Soon you'll command military forces of your own. And one day lead Germa 66 to even greater heights. All thanks to the power of science. As the memory panned across the orderly children, Luffy pointed. Hey, Sanji's eyebrows don't match. That's why he's special. He laughed in delight. Like he always knew the man he chose as the chef to the future Pirate King was special and was waiting for the physical evidence to tell everyone else. Apparently to Luffy, that evidence was the direction his eyebrows curled. Robin smiled gently. You're right, Luffy. They go in the opposite direction than those of his brothers and sister. Nami noticed a certain swordsman had gone unnaturally still at their captain's observation. Are you okay? She quietly asked him. Was he okay? Zoro wasn't sure. Not when all he could picture was raid suit extraordinaire stealth black, brow swooping the same way as his brothers and sister. This was what the cook was afraid of when he made that oath with Zoro back in Wano, wasn't it? Zoro never really took the request too seriously. Thought Sanji might have been overreacting. He was a dramatic dark bro, after all. But this had Zoro rethinking everything. Was Sanji's true fear turning into his brothers? Cold and heartless and cruel? And could it seriously happen? Zoro closed his eye and breathed, reopening his steely gaze with sudden calm. He refused to think about that right now. I gave you the power, Judge was saying. Your job is to train. All 5 kids straightened like soldiers. Yes, father. Vinsmoke Judge smiled, and the filter of a memory melted back to Niji pounding mercilessly at his blonde brother with the bamboo sword. Nearly unconscious as the Germa soldiers pulled Niji off him, Sanji just knew that his father was angry. Not because his son was being beaten, but because his son was so weak. The gap in their scores keeps increasing. Judge was complaining to his Germa scientists when the memory shot forward in time again. The experts were scribbling madly on their clipboards. The one who seemed to oversee most things responded. We got the test results back, sir. Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji are making excellent progress in their training. Their exoskeletons have developed, and according to the data we've gathered their flexibility and strength are already equivalent to those of grown men. On the other hand, the scientist trailed off as he watched a bleeding and bruised Sanji be mercilessly beaten with bamboo sticks by all 3 of his brothers now. Nami was furious. What the hell? Why are they allowing that? They aren't training anymore. I'm beginning to wonder how our Sanji survived his childhood at all, said Brook, as everyone glowered at the screen. It is interesting how the girl never participates, Robin said. As much as she hated it, she came to expect such violence against Sanji, and so tried to focus on other specifics. It pains me to tell you this, the scientist continued, but unfortunately, Sanji has proven himself to be a failure. There's that fucking word again, Zoro internally growled. We were certain that we had successfully modified the bloodline elements for each of the children. But for some unknown reason, Sanji's seemed to have converted back to their original configuration. Through the bloodline, Robin noted, intrigued despite herself. She watched as the Hollowell scientists furiously typed away at this new information. So Sanji was spared somehow. Chopper curled in on himself. Just like we thought, but still. Luffy reached over and patted Chopper on the head with both hands, since they were tied together, smiling down at the reindeer. That means Sanji's made of something special. Zoro, eye closed again and sitting in his meditation position, huffed quietly. We already knew he was something special. Ah. Nami nudged her shoulder into his. Realizing what he said, the swordsman sputtered, turning beet red and almost losing his balance. the others snickered. On-screen, Judge narrowed his eyes at the scientist's final diagnosis. Sanji's normal. He's just human. Vinsmoke Judge did not like that. Vinsmoke Sanji, third son of Vinsmoke Judge, king of the Northern Blues warmongering, seafaring nation, Germa. Judge focused his efforts on Germa 66's advanced military technology with aspirations of power, rule, and control. Pretty classic stuff, as far as the Straw Hats were concerned. And that had been more or less the extent of their combined knowledge, until now. Now, the secret of the Vinsmoke children had been revealed. Through the bloodline, Judge had genetically mutated his own offspring, enhancing their abilities to a superhuman level while diminishing their vassals of emotion. The plan was obvious, clearly aimed to turn them into the perfect soldiers, fearless in the face of death and compassionless in the face of their enemies. Unfortunately for the power-hungry tyrant, one of his children was spared the theft of their humanity. Sanji remained human. And it was to the future pirate chef's misfortune that he had grown up in an environment where war and violence were all that was accepted. Zoro had thought it multiple times in the past, but now he was certain bad luck followed that cook everywhere. Neither he nor the Straw Hats could fathom how such a vile upbringing had bore their kind, loving cook, though. Surely, what they were watching was a villain's origin story. And yet, within the realm of Sanji's memories, a young Reiju was busy wrapping a bandage around her weakest brother's swollen head. Little Sanji never understood why she bothered. It was the first time the Straw Hats had seen anyone taking care of the little cook. After one final wrap around the blonde head, Reiju stepped back with pride. There. Thank you, Sanji muttered. But why'd you help? What? You'd rather I didn't? Sad Sanji shook his head, sweat-matted yellow strands falling into his solemn eyes. I'm glad you do. He whispered, you're nice. Reiju didn't like that. Nah. Shut up. Yeah, how dare he, Usopp muttered. I believe there's more to his sister than meets the eye, said Robin. But all the same, nice, probably isn't a trait a soldier of Germa prides themselves in. Nami and Chopper huffed at her words. A child shouldn't be considered a soldier. In confusion, a somber Sanji looked up at her through wet lashes. When they're mean, you laugh also. How come? It's not like I have a choice, Reiju shot back. If I try to stop them then they'll just start picking on me, no thanks. Ah, there it is, the Straw Hats thought, the catch. But why does she care to help him at all if she feels nothing for him? Nami wondered. It didn't make sense with the no emotions thing. The memories swirled into a transition. The two Vinsmokes aged gracefully. Sanji, trimmed, square jaw, cigarette at his lips, rolled his eyes at the now-grown pink-haired woman lounging behind him. He was back in his prince outfit, leaning on the ledge of a balcony. Why don't you go away already? He said. He had cut ties with all of them 13 years ago and he had wanted it to stay that way. The scene before them seemed to fast forward. Reiju's beautiful blue gaze appraised her brother. Our father's dream is to bring the North Blue under Germa's control again. What's wrong with that? A stubborn twinkle gleamed in her expression. Why don't you enjoy being a member of privileged royalty rather than play pirate with your silly friends? Sanji narrowed his eyes. Screw you. Reiju wasn't deterred by her brother's hostility. She continued to try to persuade him to accept his royal lineage. The gorgeous handmaids at his beck and call almost had him, much to the Straw Hats' chagrin and Luffy's amusement, and Brook stating that he would have understood. But the cook cleared his throat and managed to resist. Yeah, no, it's almost like she's trying to make it easier on him, Brook commented. Again, why does she care? Nami retorted. Robin though about it for a moment. She's the eldest of the Vinsmokes, perhaps, being the first, she also managed to retain a sliver of humanity. Then why doesn't she help him more? Chopper demanded. Robin gave him a sad, small smile. I did say a sliver. War is profitable, Reiju continued. And our business grants us the life of luxury. Let the minions handle combat. Does that not sound appealing? Nah, that sounds boring, Luffy said. We Vinsmokes have earned that right through the sheer power of our military science. You have that blood in your veins. Sanji was tired of hearing that crap. I don't give a damn. Reiju seemingly gave up after that, though she continued watching her brother with curiosity. It truly did seem like she was trying to make things easier on him in her own way. Accept his fate and there would be no problems. No need to needlessly suffer. That's when Vinsmoke Judge strutted through the doorway, older, grayer, just as harsh. "Are you still in here sulking?" were his first words to his son in over a decade. "Show some respect, son." As older Sanji turned his head slowly to the side to glower at the man, his face faded back into his younger self's. Softer, more innocence in his bright eyes, even with the bandages scarring his tinier body. Little Sanji was alone, thank God. A rare moment of peace for the boy, who seemed to be in his childhood bedroom. At least he had his own room, the Straw Hats thought. It wasn't much, but with the life they were seeing it was something. The little cook was carrying a plate filled with food, holding back a grin. With gentle hands, he set it on a shelf and walked away, plopping down with a pile of books. He was waiting for something. A minute later, a soft squeak was heard. A baby mouse scurried along the shelf and made its way over to the dish Sanji had left. The little boy peeked up from his book excitedly. "Oh, he's here. Did he make that, specifically, for the mouse?" Brook wondered. "Stop. That's so cute," Nami said. Usopp mumbled, "But it's a mouse. Let him cook, damn it, he has no one else. What is wrong with you?" If they were in range, she would have knocked their heads together, and they each shimmied to the ends of their respective cells farthest from Nami's because they could sense the violence emanating from her aura. The mouse was hesitant at first, its ears flattening and nose twitching. But with a quiet, delicate tone, Sanji urged it on. "Go ahead, eat." When the tiny creature looked up at the soft voice, the little human, scraped up as he was smiling kindly. "I made it for you. Hope you like it." "He's precious," Robin murmured, cheeks tinted pink again. Cute things were her weakness. Who knew Mr. Love Cook had been such an adorable thing? Chopper ran an arm across his watering eyes. Even with nobody to cook for, he still didn't cook for himself. Zoro chuckled at their doctor's observation. Even back then, Sanji was all about taking care of others. Even when he needed the most taking care of. Zoro's laugh died on his lips at the last thought. Usopp was chuckling, too, however. If only Sanji could see the heart eyes he was getting from the ladies now. Even from Chopper. The reindeer sniffled. "Shut up." The mouse dug into the food with a happy trill. Little Sanji's face moved closer, a massive grin plastered to it. "Well?" he asked after a moment, eager. He had practiced a lot to get this recipe just right. All the Straw Hats smiled at that. They couldn't help it. It was just like what he did now with them, no matter the meal. Eager and excited and ever passionate about his craft. Right at that moment, however, Judge barged through the door, growling. Sanji, the boy in question, and the mouse he was feeding, jumped. Judge scowled at what he was seeing. "Gaw, you're cooking for the rats again, aren't you? I thought I told you royalty doesn't serve anyone." Trying to block the animal and the food from view, Sanji held up his band-aid hands. "But, I just..." Whatever Judge saw on his son's face disgusted him. His fist went flying in contact with a picture frame before Sanji could explain himself. Glass shattered. Sharp shards of MP in front of an image of what seemed to be an even smaller Sanji. The toddler was beaming beside someone, but Judge's thick fist blocked them from view. "She's dead," Judge yelled. The Straw Hats froze. "And you know that, so stop trying to be like your mother." Sanji's mouth hung open in fear and sadness and shame. Although Robin's heart wasn't the only one that ached, she at least knew what it was like to be a little kid clinging to the image of their long-lost mother, but even then, it hadn't been her family who hurt her. Sanji did nothing to deserve such insensitivity. Judge continued on in his fury. "Unlike your siblings, you were born without an ounce of talent, so, you'll train hard, 100 times harder than them. You're my son, which means you're an integral part of my plan to restore the Germa Empire to its glory. Do not disappoint me." Sanji shrunk in on himself as his father made his way over to him. With another shattering of glass, little Sanji screamed. Judge had thrown the food, and the baby mouse, out the window. Chopper and Nami gasped. Sanji watched, helpless, as they fell far below his desperate reach. "There." Judge rubbed his hands like he had done something good. He sneered down at the pathetic boy still half hunched out the window in a sad rescue attempt. "Don't ever cook again," he ordered before turning to leave. The words hung over the Straw Hats like an anvil. As they watched their small chef process everything that had just happened to him, as well as his father's vicious demand, there was nothing from them but pure hatred aimed at Vinsmoke Judge. Nobody was allowed to try to crush their chef's dreams like that. Their only solace at this point was knowing Sanji clearly hadn't listened. Still, watching the scene progress did little to calm the crew. Shocked and hurt, Sanji's face contorted with tears. The broken window mirrored the broken frame of him and his mother, which mirrored the shattering of his own heart at Judge's words. And this time, Sanji started wailing. Head thrown back as he cried out his frustration, painful tears flooding his scratched face. And as he cried and cried, the memory re-shifted back to 13 years later when father and son reunited. "Are you still in here sulking? Show some respect, son." Prince Sanji glowered at his so-called father. "Don't call me son." Vinsmoke Judge challenged Sanji to a duel, already irritated with his son's disrespect. Out in the courtyard of Germa's castle, its soldiers gathered with spirit. Excitement poured out of them for Prince Sanji's return, eager to see him in action. It was like not a single one of them remembered how fragile Sanji used to be. Which many of the Straw Hats found interestingly odd, maybe even a little off. Although still as uninterested in fighting if he didn't have to, Sanji was now a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. And he didn't need a raid suit, Nami thought. As Judge, all suited up, prepared a spear-like weapon for attack, Sanji remained calm. It wasn't until the last second did Sanji easily dodge his father's first strike, exhibiting his signature nonchalance with his hands never leaving his pockets. "Vinsmoke Judge has a super ass-kicking headed his way," Frankie said, adding an enthusiastic, "Yow." "Yeah, kick his ass," Sanji, Usopp and Chopper cheered. Zoro smirked. He couldn't wait for the cook to showcase his strength to that jackass. And sure, maybe Zoro enjoyed opportunities to watch the Arrow Cook's obscenely long legs in action without being distracted by a sword fight of his own. He would never admit it out loud, but, damn, he loved to watch that man fight. Graceful and powerful at the same time. Capable. Insanely flexible in a way no mortal being had a right to be. Judge clearly wasn't expecting much from Sanji and, much to the Straw Hats' shameless delight, his arrogance hindered him. At first, the King of Germa quickly held his own after that, and after a few spars and a couple irritated exchanges Sanji was scowling again. "Stop saying you're my father, it's getting on my nerves. Like it or not you are my son. Then why are you trying to stab me then?" Luffy laughed at the same time Usopp muttered, "That's a valid argument." Chopper nodded seriously at the sniper. That's when Judge started to bring up the wedding to Big Mom's daughter, effectively eliminating any enjoyment Zoro was getting from this duel. Sanji's mind, however, was still adamant there wasn't going to be a wedding. "I only came here to save my friends' lives," he told him. Nami frowned, glancing over at Luffy. As if he could sense her guilt, they made eye contact. Her captain smiled reassuringly at her as if reading her thoughts, but she still felt bad for losing faith in their cook, no matter how slight it was. Judge looked appalled. "You'd abandon your family?" Sanji seethed. "You bastards were never my family." Vinsmoke Judge sure has the audacity," said Brook. As the dueling Vinsmokes continued, Judge switched tactics. Sanji blocked Judge's blow with his shin, which actually seemed to surprise the man that he was able to stop a blade with his bare skin. "The feeble son I once knew wields haki now?" Sanji's only answer was a glare. This time when Judge backed off he told his soldiers to fetch a sword, which he then threw at Sanji's feet. "Take it." Zoro scoffed. Sanji didn't move. "What's the matter? Surely you haven't forgotten my teachings." At a blinding speed, Sanji kicked the blade back toward the king. It swept through multiple strands of his long hair before piercing into the wall behind him. Sanji's foot was still in the air. "I'm not interested. If you knew me at all, you'd realize I never used that crap." Lighting a cigarette, he took a drag and met his biological father's malicious gaze with determination. "Get this through your skull. My hands are for cooking only." It was clear Judge hadn't realized Sanji was still cooking after all these godforsaken years. "Someone's offended," hummed Brook. "Yeah, us. For having to keep looking at this asshole's smug face," Zoro griped, making Luffy cackle again. He loved a grumpy Zoro. "For cooking, you say? That's absurd." "Your face is absurd," Chopper cutely grumbled, taking cue from Zoro. Are you still making rat food? Serving is not a talent befit for royalty. It's ludicrous. The angry heat between the two escalated. You're out of touch, old man. Why resist the merit? Judge wondered. Don't you know what's good for you? When Sanji showed no sign of caring about the king's words, Judge activated the close combat mode on his raid suit. The scene progressed with lightning speed. Sanji met Judge in an aerial attack, but Judge grabbed his leg and threw him down, yelling, "War is the catalyst for scientific progress." Judge hovered above Sanji, and it was clear he wasn't getting out of the way fast enough for the next blow. The rebel chef was sent flying after an electric kick pierced him in the chest, tumbling across the ground and through walls. Frankie and Usopp winced in sympathy. The Germa you were once familiar with, Judge said, speaking as if his victory was imminent, is now a relic of the past. Sanji groaned from the ground at the overpowered kick. He was in no rush to get up. No point he felt he had to prove to this guy. He laid on his back, taking a casual drag. A cloud passed above him, and as he watched it, his thoughts echoed through the lab. Little Sanji, I've got something I want to ask. Do you owe someone respect just because you're related by blood? At this, the memory began its next transition, swirling backward in time once again and reminding the intrusive viewers that the hardships of Sanji's past weren't over. From this point on, Judge had promised little Sanji his training would be 100 times harder than his siblings. This is not gonna go well, Usopp groaned. The sniper felt so bad for Sanji it made him physically sick. All at once, the memories where the little Vinsmokes had been training together instantly intensified. Not for all of them. Just Sanji. Little human Sanji, already at an unfair disadvantage, was pushed harder and harder every day. With each passing memory, Judge made it clear to the overseers to stack harsher regimes on the boy to make up for his lack of skill. And as scene by scene played out, it was clear Sanji was being worn down to the very ends of his limits. That's too brutal, Frankie said, a deep scowl etched above his pointy chin. It was never ending for this poor kid. Nami moaned. There's no way he can keep going like this. Hey, slowpoke, Yanji yelled in the next shift of memory as the siblings raced together, all save for one yellow-haired boy. Can't you run any faster? Behind them, a struggling Sanji was trying his hardest not to throw up or pass out as his brother yelled about how pathetic he was. Imagine growing up with absolutely zero words of encouragement, Robin said sadly. It was tragic, heartbreaking. Zoro's fists clenched and unclenched. The real question, he thought as his gaze traced the screened memories down to their source, was how long they were going to make the cook relive this crap. Nothing's changed, someone was heard telling the king of Germa. Judge didn't blink. This didn't surprise him anymore. He was a smart man, and all he needed was confirmation of what he had already realized. He has no potential, he asked. None. Then it seems he is simply a waste of life. Nobody liked that. Luffy's and Zoro's eyes darkened considerably. What should we do, sir? With that question in mind, Sanji's feelings themselves seemed to dominate the screen suddenly. There was no picture. No color. Only emptiness and an ominous sadness radiating from the darkness, followed by an anxious heartbeat. And then the screen blinked back to life, shaping a black and white photo into existence. It was of little Sanji, with the little number 3 on his shirt and his innocent little smile. It was draped in memorial ribbon. The Straw Hats' hearts dropped. They knew, rationally, that Sanji had to be alive of course, but... Vinsmoke Judge took to a podium to explain to his people how tragic his third son's accident was. How they lost him too soon. How he'd be missed. All lies, and yet the attending Germa citizens were the only ones crying at his performance. The funeral was obviously staged, and yet no hitch left the Straw Hats' minds to reel, trying to think of what that vile man actually did with Sanji. That's when the memory slowly panned to a quivering blue eye of the little boy who was now dead to the outside world. Sanji blinked and stepped back, face coming fully into view, confused and more than a little frightened. What's happening? What are they going to do with him? Nami whimpered, hands tucked into herself with worry. Nobody had a single idea. All breaths being held in waiting. As Sanji stared in terror at whoever was herding him backwards, his tender voice rang out in the darkroom, trembling. Huh? Wait. Darkness encompassed him as his eyes were covered. A clink of metal sounded, followed by the fastening of a lock. Suddenly, Sanji was peering out through a slit of solid iron. "What is this thing?" His voice trembled further. "It's really heavy." "What is that thing?" Chopper demanded with urgency as he watched, hooves dragging down his furry cheeks. Little Sanji's full body came into view then as he stumbled, almost losing his balance completely. Everyone else looked on with wide, horrified eyes. "It's an iron helmet." Robin's hand flew up to cover her mouth as her voice broke. She didn't want to finish anyway. Didn't want to have to explain out loud. It was an atrocity. Vicious and cruel, and placed upon a child. No matter how hard Sanji pushed, the mask locked over his head and jaw never even budged. His tiny voice spiked in alarm. "What are you guys doing to me?" Nobody answered the boy, or gave him so much as any warning. A metal cell closed in around the distressed blonde until he was securely locked behind bars. "Oh my God," Nami whispered in horror. Luffy's face lowered until the rim of his straw hat cast a shadow upon his livid scowl. Zoro's nails broke through skin. Little Sanji panicked, ran to the locked gate and gripped the steel poles with tight fists too small to even wrap fully around one. He was being locked away. He didn't understand. He wasn't a bad guy. The two Germa soldiers who had escorted him to his fate turned to go, and Sanji cried out with a fresh wave of fear. "Don't leave. You can't lock me up forever, let me out." When the two guards showed no sign of hearing him, and began up the winding stairwell without a word or look back, Sanji's eyes filled with watery terror. "Please come back," he whimpered. "I'm scared. I'll die here." A mixture of bitter grief and jarring shock and anguished rage contorted each face around the room in a wave of violent emotions too strong for even the most brilliant minds to articulate. "I want my dad," Sanji sniffled. Such naivete broke several composures around the room further. Surely one day in the future Sanji would be able to look back and realize the abuse, the trauma. However, this Sanji was still bonded and innocent and hopeful in. "Dad, where are you?" Sanji banged against the metal rods with the sides of his fists. Fists that were already covered in various degrees of scratches and bruises. "Help! They're trying to kill me." At that, one of the soldiers turned back to the prince with a frown. "Sorry," he said, "but your father is the one who decided this." Sanji froze. "My father? But that makes no sense." Sanji squeezed his eyes closed, continuing his fussing. "No, there has to be a mistake." "It is harsh," the soldier seemed to agree. "But this is not a mistake. He intends to make it as if you were never born." Freezing again, Sanji watched the guards disappear in silence until he was alone. All alone. In the deep dredges of the Germa dungeon. Sanji's eyes flooded with realization. His entire body started to shake, bones shivering, muscles quaking, head pounding in time with his heart. He threw his fists one last, desperate time against the cell door before sliding helplessly to the icy, stone floor of his new forever home, racking with sobs that spilled endlessly from the iron mask that made it difficult for him to even keep his neck supported and his head up. His voice cracked with heartbreaking despair. "But why? What did I do wrong, Dad?" "It's not your fault, Sanji, please, if only you could understand." "Sanji, it's not you." "Oh, Sanji. You did nothing wrong, cook." "Sanji." Sanji's blue eyes peered through the iron slits with a profound fear as he whispered, "Let me out." Then he grew louder, until he was yelling, his cries ricocheting through the abandoned hall. "I'm sorry, why? I'm sorry that I was born so weak. Please help me. I can't live here by myself, Dad." The straw hats shook. Sanji clung to the helmet like he wanted to rip it off but knew he couldn't. Nails scratching until they bled. Body deflating and rising in an anxiety-induced back-and-forth state. His voice grew more and more hoarse as he cried. Cried for help. For comfort. For warmth. For safety. For another chance. For anything and anyone. And the straw hats cried with him. Darkness consumed the screens. Metal clanging. Hopeless sobs. Whimpering. Echoes of a child suffering and alone. There was no color in little Sanji's life, yet Zoro was seeing red. With a flash of dulled vibrancy, 4 children appeared on the monitors like ghostly wisps, fighting against hordes of Germa soldiers and beating them easily as Germa scientists praised their quick progress. Vinsmoke Judge called to them with a rare smile. "You've done well," he said. The kids, pink, red, blue, and green, grinned back, running toward their dad in a trail of laughter. Judge opened his arms wide as the four jumped into them. "I'm so proud of you all." He laughed with them, gazing down with a kindness nobody had seen before. "My little masterpieces," he praised. Then, in a puff of smoke, the image solidified. There was Sanji. Tiny and shaking, and curled up in a ball with a metal helmet locked around his head in a cold, damp dungeon. Alone. Zoro's eyes trailed from the helmeted child on the screen to adult Curly, who was grimacing and strapped unceremoniously to a medical table. It was slight, but Zoro could make out the shaking of Sanji's sweat-soaked body. He remembered the way the cook had panicked when the helmet was placed on his head. Suddenly, Zoro was moving. "Zoro, no!" Nami screamed. Next, Sanji was seen back at present-day Germa Castle after his duel with Judge sent him flying onto his back. The cook was still asking his younger self a question. "Little Sanji, I've got something I want to ask." Zoro rammed into the clear prison wall. Just like with Luffy, it shot him back in a wave of blue light. But the pirate hunter turned pirate was on his feet again, colliding with the cell door even harder than before. Again, he was sent flying. Nami ducked with a scream, Zoro barely missing her as he soared past. The bald specialist with the robotic arm, Invir, stood and clicked something on his metal wrist. What happened to his leg restraints? The cell door buzzed brighter. "Zoro, calm down," Nami yelled when the swordsman pushed himself back on his feet and sprang again. "There's nothing we can do right now, please. You're just going to get yourself hurt." Usopp joined, watching Zoro fling himself just as unsuccessfully as the first two times. He almost crashed into Nami again. "And me? You're going to get me hurt," the navigator cried, rolling to the far ends of the containment hold. She kept her own legs pressed firmly together with the illusion they were still shackled. She had been using the scientist's distraction with Sanji's memories to pick at her and Zoro's leg restraints, with resounding success. Leave it to the reckless mosshead to act out and draw attention to the fact his legs were free. The idiot. Sanji's thoughts continued through the chaos. "Do you owe someone respect just because you're related by blood?" "We should sedate that one," Ashvin said, watching as the green-haired Straw Hat tried to catch his breath, his tanned skin smoking from all of Invir's electricity. Teal-haired Reese glanced over her shoulder at him as well. "He is in love with the sad Vinsmoke," she stated. Zoro blushed and sputtered out a breath as he got back on his feet once again. "Who asked you?" He spat. His next words were directed at Hollowell. "Hey, it's obvious you're not gonna find what you're looking for. That asshole Vinsmoke obviously didn't think highly enough of the cook to let him in on anything, so take that fucking helmet off him." T-shi-shi-shi. Men like Vinsmoke Judge oftentimes prefer to needlessly show off their secrets. Hollowell clicked his tongue with a creepy grin and snapped his fingers at his specialists. Let him throw his love tantrums. There is no escaping containment even if he had faulty restraints. Seeing as how the female Straw Hat still had her leg restraints locked, Invir nodded and retook his seat without question. "Yes, sir," the specialists chorused, not even sparing Zoro a second glance. The swordsman was kind of offended actually. And pissed. Panting heavily and glaring at them all. "What do you say?" Sanji wondered, thinking of the biological father he was currently in battle with. Any fond memories of him? "Can't think of one, can you?" If they weren't going to listen, Zoro would make them listen. "Sit down," Nami hissed at him. When it looked like he was about to call her a witch and argue, she said through gritted teeth, "Don't ruin this." She wiggled her fingers, and his eyes traced down to see that their resident cat burglar's wrists were free. "Don't worry about Sanji, Zoro," Luffy said. "He can take this." "Doesn't mean he should have to," the swordsman grumbled. "I'm sorry. You've suffered so much," Zoro scowled. "See? The dumbass is apologizing to himself now. Always guilty when he didn't have to be." The shitty martyr made Zoro insane. The Straw Hats did frown at that, but Robin tried to reason. "Our dear cook will be free soon enough." She made a pointed glance toward Nami so he knew what she was referring to without alerting their captors. "Let us remain rested until then, Zoro met Luffy's bright, knowing gaze then. The captain smiled reassuringly, and Zoro fell to his knees in defeat. He watched Sanji stand, on-screen, as flashes of his life in the Iron Mask went through his mind. "Father, let me out. It's so dark in here. Please, father." I'm sure you've got nothing but anger towards him, Sanji thought. He watched the cold man who had been behind most of his suffering charge at him again, spear at the ready. Sanji poised for the attack, leg raising slowly and precisely. All the years of pent-up anger flowed through him, centering at the ball of his foot as he prepared his kick. This was a moment Sanji never knew he had been waiting for. The pain of the past mixed with the fury of the present. Vinsmoke Judge would pay, right now. That was something Zoro could get behind, almost relishing the memory, wishing he had been there. As Judge came at him, spear blazing, Sanji started to call out his attack when suddenly his father called out first. Wall up. In an instant, Germa soldiers had converged on Sanji, creating a wall of men between him and Judge. Sanji hesitated with innocent people in the way. But as Judge's spear sped closer, Sanji's eyes widened, as did the Straw Hats, and he shouted, "Watch out, he's heading straight for you." But the soldiers didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even flinch. Sanji balked as the soldier in the middle was impaled. Judge's spear didn't stop as it went for Sanji, now smeared in the soldier's blood, and at the last second Sanji's foot came up in defense, contacting with the point of Judge's blade. His hesitation cost him. The impact hurt. It shot Sanji into the sky, cigarette flying free from his mouth, KO'd. The Germa soldiers cheered. The Straw Hats' mouths were hung open in shock as the scientists of Hollowell Mind Tech grew intrigued by such thoughtless obedience. Luffy quickly turned angry, however. What a lousy cheater. He just used his own men as a shield, Usopp squeaked. What kind of person would do something like that? Chopper rubbed at his poor eyes. He didn't think the tears would ever stop at this rate. A cruel one, Zoro stated, and a coward. That's super uncool. Sanji had that fight in the bag before Judge pulled that nasty trick. To have men willing and ready to die by your own hand, for such a trivial duel, as well. Brook shook his head. Makes my blood boil. At least it would if I had any veins, yo-ho-ho. Robin agreed with the skeleton. I wonder if Germa's soldiers are also modified. T-shi-shi-shi. You see what I meant about powerful men wanting to show off the extent of their power, Roronoa Zoro. The swordsman snapped at Hollowell. Shut the hell up, I wasn't asking. After Reiju patched Sanji up like old times, commenting how she couldn't believe he was the same helpless brother she used to know, Judge entered the scene again, somehow more smug than before. Of course he and Sanji argued, with the cook, that it was his blood that ran in Sanji's veins. Quite the narcissist to keep bringing that up, hummed Brook. You would think Judge wouldn't bring it up as often as he does considering he believes Sanji a failed Vinsmoke, Robin said. However, with Judge's next words, it was clear why he was suddenly adamant Sanji remember who sired him. I require Big Mom's help, Judge explained. But unfortunately she requires a blood connection in return. Well, I still don't get it, muttered Usopp. Why'd he have to bring Sanji into it if he has so many other precious masterpieces? The sniper made a face as he imitated Vinsmoke Judge. Frankly, I do not relish the thought of marrying off one of my invaluable sons to someone in that demented madwoman's lineage. Usopp instantly frowned. Ah, just a pawn in a very cold game of chess, Brook sang. Judge eyed Sanji pointedly. Then I remembered, years ago I had another child who was an absolute failure. Tell me you guys killed this asshole, grumbled Zoro. Well, Nami, Chopper, and Brook all trailed off, making faces. Oh man, you'd have been so mad, Luffy chortled as if it was the funniest thing in the world. Zoro thought maybe he didn't want to know anymore what happened on that damn island. You'll be a sacrifice for the family, Judge continued. Understood? I haven't changed my opinion of you, and I do not think of you as a worthy son. Just so we're clear. As Sanji's eyes were reluctantly pinned on Judge, Reiju snaked her way over to him and something cold clicked against both of Sanji's wrists. Gold bracelets? No, not bracelets, Judge smirked. You mentioned your hands are important to you. That works in my favor. You know of the collars celestial dragons put on their slaves, yes? The crew froze, hit with instant realization at where this was going. If they try to escape from their masters, it detonates, removing their heads. He gestured to Sanji's new accessories. These are rigged to work the same way. If you try to flee, your hands will be blown off. Chopper gasped. No, geez. Usopp winced. Guy can't catch a break. like, at all. Zoro's temper was rising again. Those bastards threatened his hands on top of everything else? It took a moment for Luffy and Nami to process what they just watched, and then suddenly they both shouted, "Wait, huh? When did he have those?" Nami demanded. "Wait, he was wearing them when we first found him, wasn't he?" "Oh yeah." Luffy nodded. "I thought they were just part of his fancy prince outfit." Nami groaned. "How do you guys not know about these?" Usopp asked. Nami pouted in frustration. "Look, a lot was happening, okay? And he never said anything." "He wouldn't, though," Zoro muttered with his eye closed, trying to keep calm. Nami sighed. "I suppose you're right. He wouldn't have wanted us to worry, and looking back at his past, I don't think Sanji thought he was worth the trouble." The thought saddened Nami considerably. Maybe that's why he pushed us away so hard that day. Something about her words made Zoro's stomach clench uneasily. He always wondered how their captain brought their cook back. How it went down. Wasn't his place to ask, though. Even after he and the cook became official, he didn't feel right asking. And the witch had another point that Zoro didn't want to consider, that Sanji probably never expected Luffy to go after him. He didn't expect the same passion that Luffy had for the rest of the crew because Sanji didn't think his worth was equal to theirs. Bile rose in Zoro's throat. He'd never felt so much rage in his life. Watching the stupid tiny cook suffer and realizing that past still haunted him to this day. And he didn't say a fucking word to anybody. What a fucking pain. How'd Dark Bro end up with such a shitty family? Chopper noted, however, that Sanji didn't have the cuffs on when he and Luffy arrived at Bega's castle. "Oh," Nami realized. "You're right. See? He got them off." Luffy grinned. "Nothing to worry about." "Still can't believe we didn't know," the navigator mumbled. "It had to be yet another knife they were holding above his head to keep him there," Brook said. "And with his childhood it's no wonder the guy felt he had no choice but to go along with them," Frankie added. Robin sighed sadly. "And now they're threatening to take away the thing he prides himself in most." I wouldn't have let it happen anyway," Luffy said. Matter of fact. He wasn't worried because it was in the past, and he knew how it ended. And he also knew that if he had known what was happening at the time he would have saved Sanji and his hands no matter what. Those were Sanji's treasures, and Luffy would do everything to protect them. On screen, Sanji stared down with wide eyes at the gold bands only a sadist would create, and a far-off memory swirled into his head as gray brick transformed into brown wood. A gruff voice filled the room. "Now, let me see your hands," Zeph said. A grin stretched across Luffy's face again. "Hey, it's the old guy with the funny hat." That must be Zeph, Robin guessed. Although the face was new to some, his name had been shared with all the Straw Hats at some point along their journey. He was clearly part of Sanji's better memories. She was delighted to finally put a face to the name. Tiny, scratched palms appeared, and a now tween Sanji was pouting up at the wiry whiskered chef who had taken him in. Zeph took one of the kid's reddening hands and began to gently wrap it. "It's covered in bruises," the older cook scolded. Sanji's frown faded as he inspected the bandage. He wasn't expecting the old man to take care of it like that. But then, "Stupid brat," Zeph said, fist suddenly knocking Sanji upside his blonde head. Offended, Sanji shot back, "Why'd you do that, you old geezer? I've explained this before. Don't you ever use your hands for fighting?" Young Sanji paused to consider this. He didn't quite understand it yet, but he hung onto his mentor's words until it was a part of him. Now, as the memory focused back on the cuffs clasped around adult Sanji's wrists, the fear in the curly-browed cook's eyes was evident. Sanji looked up from his captive hands and glared at the two Vinsmokes in front of him. "Screw you. Take him off." Judge scoffed at the order. "You can't run away. Cuffs or no cuffs." Judge continued after telling him only Big Mom possessed the key. "Because I have the entire Germa army to put you in your place. We will see this marriage through."